Okay.
All right, let's start with our opening prayers. Taking refuge, generating bodhicitta, once in English, twice in the Tibetan chant. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the positive potential I create by listening to teachings and the other paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodam sokhi chognam la Jamchu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi jinso gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye druparsu Sangye chodam sokhi chognam la Jangshu bardu dagni kyapsuchi Dagi jinso gipe sonam ki Rola penchir sangye druparsu. For immeasurable thoughts. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is completely free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May we be blessed by our spiritual teachers, gurus, all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to have the spiritual power and the perseverance and enthusiasm to accomplish this. All right, now on the next page, the 7-limb prayer, and this follows what we did last week, or this is an outline of what we covered last week. And I'm thinking maybe I may do something similar to what I did with the refuge visualization and create an audio of that. So, you could sit, listen to it, visualize, and go through all the elements of it so that, become very familiarized with it.
Yeah.
Once we're really familiarized, then we do our own thing with it.
Right.
And it really does take form and grow and become very meaningful when we do that. But we have to know the basics first and familiarize ourselves with it. So here's the prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merits of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate the merit created by myself and others to the great enlightenment. And finally, we make the mandala offering. From Rabling Nidagyan Vadi Sang Jindu Midelwadi Drokum Amdachinga Chapasho Idam Guru Radna Mandala Tam. Okie dokie. So this week we're going to talk about creating our future self, and we are always in the process of creating our future self due to causes and conditions, our behavior, our the way we think, and the way we speak will all contribute to who we are and who we are going to become. Now, obviously, this has to do with big time with what with karma. The actions that that cause who we are becoming. And so today we're going to go into some of the mechanics of karma. We're actually back on book. Huh? We're finally back on book. Last week was so funny. We've been talking so much about mantras and all these visualization practices and all this kind of stuff. I couldn't even think of the name of this book. I know it's by Nagarjuna, but it's not Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. Precious Garland. So we're back on book today. Yay. Still in chapter 1.
While you're speaking of everything, creating your own reality, your own self,
Future
through karma. I'm in the chat is the recommended practices from the FPMT site for Sakadawa, and it's quite comprehensive.
Oh, good.
So it's corresponds with full moon. It's Buddha's birth and enlightenment for those of you who weren't here earlier, and here it comes in the chat. And I will send that out also. So some interesting reading and as well as practices you can do. We will not organize anything tomorrow.
Okay, so we'll start with a little review of the last session. So if we want to create a fortunate rebirth for ourselves as a human being, which is considered to be the best optimum rebirth for Buddhist spiritual practice, we definitely should follow the Buddha's enlightenment advice that he gave us by refraining from the 10 negative actions of body, speech, and mind, and engaging in the 10 positive actions that will counteract those. When we do this in conjunction with the Vajrasattva mantra, as described in the last session, which I've put a link to in this new study guide, that will help us remove the negative karmic imprints that are on our mental continuum, and we will be able to replace those with positive karmic imprints. And that's very much about the process of creating our future self that's, going to allow us to change for the better, and we'll experience more happiness and less disturbance in our daily lives. Okay, so here we start now. Nagarjuna, after giving us the 10 actions to avoid and the 10 actions to counteract them, the positive actions, he talks about 3 other ones, 3 additional actions that we should avoid and 3 actions that we should practice. And this is in stanza 10. Not drinking intoxicants, a good livelihood, non-harming, respectful giving. Those are the ones to avoid. And then 3 to engage in are respectful giving, honoring the honorable, and cultivating love. Practice in brief is that. So the 10 non-virtues aren't the only negative actions that we should avoid. Taking intoxicants, engaging in wrong livelihood, and harming others are also activities we should stay clear of. So what I would say is excessive indulgent use of intoxicants such as alcohol or pot or tobacco or psychedelic drugs are not going to be helpful. They're dangerous physically, and they also will make us very it'll cloud up our mind. We'll be less clear about our judgments, especially while we're under the influence of those things. And we can make some bad decisions during those times. And I've seen that happen with people who I know who are not even addicts. I've seen it happen. Just ingesting pot the wrong way, and the really bad consequences that come up due to that. But also, if any of you have had alcoholics in your life, you can see exactly how it ruins not only their life, but it affects the entire system of relationships that they're involved in. So what I would say is His Holiness the Dalai Lama says to Westerners, it's not that you can't drink, just don't do it. Just don't indulge in it. Don't habituate yourself to it. Don't do it to the point of being, addictive. But he'll say, drink at dinner or whatever, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, he's actually said that. He says to the Tibetans, but you guys don't do it at all.
Well, I'm also gonna say that our own teachers said not even a drop, so.
Well, some say not a drop. I'm just pointing out.
I mean, to us.
I'm pointing out that what His Holiness said. Now, because Geshe Dragpa, really did not want us to be drinking at all, I stopped, and it was quite easy to do. I'm surprised at how easy it was. But I'm trying to, for the rest of you who, are not taking intoxicants to the point of being, addicted to them, it's not that you can't do it, it's just don't overindulge in it. And that's what His Holiness suggests. The reason he's told the Tibetans not to do it is, I think they're very much genetically disposed in the same way Native Americans are. They take alcohol and boom, they're gone. They're in trouble. So he tells them not to do that. Okay. Nagarjuna also advises us to earn our living in wholesome ways that don't harm others. So for instance, in business, we should avoid cheating or lying to customers, employees, or clients. We shouldn't be involved in the manufacture of merchandise that harms others, or is used to kill other beings, or that damages the environment. And we shouldn't be involved with killing other beings as a regular activity that is performed in exchange for payment. Abuse of power and not paying fair wages is also considered to be wrong livelihood. So all of these wrong livelihoods are and the ways of behaving are just a part of the samsaric experience, and they really, they can't be avoided. But we as Buddhists, if we're on the path of a bodhisattva to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, well, we should make the effort to avoid wrong livelihood, avoid these kinds of actions. But it's not like they're going to go away, because this is samsara, and the basis of samsara is ego, self-grasping, and all of these mistaken views and destructive behaviors arise out of ego, self-grasping. In addition, Nagarjuna, hey Merritt.
Hi.
Good morning.
Sorry, I'm
Good
late.
to see you.
So good to be
No
here.
problem.
Yeah.
You can sit here if you want. There's a blanket if it gets cool because of the AC. Yeah.
Or not, it's all good.
Oh, no.
Now that you did all that. Okay, thanks.
Nagarjuna recommends 3 activities that we should do. And those are practice respectful giving, honor the honorable, and cultivate love. So respectful giving is being generous with a respectful attitude and manner to those who are worthy of it, such as our spiritual teachers and other sentient beings. I mean, in general, we should be respectful of other sentient beings. The Buddha spoke of 4 kinds of generosity, and they are: 1, giving material possessions, giving fearlessness by protecting others from danger, giving love with the thought, may all beings be happy. So, if you're just out in the yard and you happen to see an animal or some ants, just have that thought, may you be happy. May all of these beings be happy. Or when you're out on the highway, driving in traffic, may everybody be happy. If you have those thoughts, it's going to sort of almost like protect us from engaging in harmful attitudes and ways of thinking, and just absent-mindedly, killing an ant or something like that. Why do it if you don't have to do it? It's not necessary. We should want them to be happy and ultimately attain enlightenment. And then giving the Dharma by giving teachings and sharing the Dharma with others is the 4th. So generosity, giving material possessions, giving fearlessness by protecting others from danger, giving love with the thought, may all beings be happy, and giving the Dharma by giving teachings and sharing the Dharma with others who are interested in it. Don't force the Dharma on anybody. it won't go well. Honoring the honorable means showing respect to those who are superior to us in good or virtuous qualities. So this would include, the trusted spiritual teachers we have, like, Geshe Nyima, Geshe Trapa, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, like that. It would also include others who have greater knowledge or more excellent qualities than we do. So just people we know who have very good qualities, whatever they may be, we should honor that. We should definitely not be jealous of it. That doesn't help a thing, So we should cultivate that sense of honoring the good qualities that others have. Cultivating love means cultivating the four immeasurables, which we've talked a lot about. Immeasurable happiness, immeasurable joy, immeasurable compassion, and immeasurable love. When we contemplate these again and again, it's going to make our minds more peaceful, and we will actually become more loving. We will become more compassionate. We'll want other beings to experience joy. So it will improve our relationship with all other beings. Now we're getting into engaging in flawed practices.
Is this a review
This is no longer a review. The only review was the very first.
when you transitioned from review
Yeah.
to?
No. The review was just talking about
Okay, so this
what we did
is
last week.
how to create
Yeah, this is all about creating your future self.
your karma,
Yeah, and it's
your karma.
do you want what do you want your future to be? I mean, you want it to be upsetting and disturbing and plagued with, anger and fear and poverty and whatever, or
I'm gonna suggest that you go into the ways that karma ripen now.
it's all here,
I'm
it's
just
coming
saying
up.
it could be more effective now so that then these.
Wait, and then please discuss. Because it's those ways karma ripens. From when Nagarjuna starts talking about them, he keeps talking about them all the way through. So we're going to be going over and over and over those again. So I don't need to talk about them quite yet, but very soon.
But soon for you.
So he wants to talk about flawed practices that others engage in that can be harmful to themselves and others. Some non-Buddhists have their own practices for attaining higher birth, many of which are very different from those that Nagarjuna recommends. So here's stanza 11. Nagarjuna says, practice is not done by just mortifying the body, for one has not forsaken injuring others and is not helping others. So what is he talking about there? There are some non-Buddhists that engage in ascetic practices where they self-inflict pain or discomfort, particularly in Nagarjuna's time in India, and still now. There's a lot of that going on. There are sadhus, Hindu sadhus, and Nagababas who will do things like fast for really, really long periods of time, thinking that's going to be beneficial, but it's actually detrimental to them. Or they'll bathe themselves like in the filthy water of the Ganges, thinking that this is somehow some spiritual holy practice. Or they will do things like they walk around naked, in the elements. I don't remember. We showed a video once, and it was this Naga Baba. I think one of them stood on one leg all the time, and another one for the rest of his life just held his arm up above his head and never ever took it down. And this is supposed to be a spiritual practice. And Nagarjuna says it's not. It's not going to. They're not going to achieve liberation or enlightenment because of that.
Right.
Because it's not helping change their mind in that way. It's not. They're not generating the positive karma. They're just doing things that are difficult for the body, and they think by doing that it's sort of somehow going to purify them so that they will have be liberated from cyclic existence, and that's not the case. And in some instances, I won't get ahead of myself here. Buddhists will engage in fasting practices as well, but they're not extreme, and they're done with the motivation of bodhicitta. And they're combined with prostrations, making offerings, meditating on emptiness, and cultivating serenity. Buddhist fire pujas, such as the ones that, if some of you may recall, I know Tracy and Brian and Geisha Sopa, when he was here, he did fire pujas out in front, a couple of them, and then he did one at your place too, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, he did.
So the fire pujas outwardly resemble non-Buddhist fire offerings, but the motivation, the meditation that the monk will do, or monk or nun will do during the practice, and the conclusion of the practice are all very different. So the motivation for why they're doing it, why a Buddhist will do those, is completely different. It's always for purifying the mind for the benefit of sentient beings, like that. All right, now we get into,
So,
yeah,
when Nagarjuna is talking about Buddhists, is he talking about all schools of Buddhism here?
From Mahayana.
he would be talking about Mahayana because that's what he was. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not even sure, does he even use the actual text use in the actual text, he never says non-Buddhist, but that's what he's referring to, you know. So people who go on the wrong path, and this is stanza 12. Those not esteeming the great path of excellent doctrine, bright with giving, ethics, and patience, afflict their bodies, taking an aberrant path like a cow path, which is deceiving oneself, and the herd that follows the cow is deceived. But I'll get into that a little bit. Stanza 13. Their bodies, embraced by the vicious snakes of the afflictive emotions, they enter for a long time the dreadful jungle of cyclic existence among the trees of endless beings. So in other words, he's saying those who follow ascetic types of practices and encourage others to do that and follow and engage in the same practices, they're actually not benefiting those others, and they are causing those others to experience detrimental karma, because they're not doing things that will transform their mind, transform their karma, enable them to be liberated from cyclic existence and go all the way to enlightenment. So he says what it's like. It's like when there's a herd of cows and there's a leader, and all the cows are following that cow, and the cow goes off of the sort of the easy main path and sort of strays off, either off to like the edge of the cliff, and they all, are in extreme danger, or like in India, the cow will take a little path that goes into the jungle, and all of a sudden they're all lost and don't know where they're going.
Right.
So that's what he's comparing these ascetic practices that he was familiar with in India, which were not actually Buddhist kinds of practices with the Buddhist motivation, the Mahayana motivation. They can actually cause more damage by leading others astray. It's, more negative karma by leading others astray.
Well, Shakyamuni essentially tried that.
He did. Yeah.
And then realized it wasn't
Working for him.
working. And,
Right. It wasn't making him any happier.
Famous statue where he's really emaciated.
I know.
Yeah.
Just skin and bones. I remember up in Geshe Drachma's his little hut up in the mountains. He had his meditation room, and on the wall was a picture of that.
Yeah.
Just this emaciated Buddha.
Yeah.
No, and I never got a chance to ask him when he looked at that image, what was his contemplation about it?
Yeah.
I'm sure it was deeper than, don't do that.
Right.
Well, I mean, I've heard some geshes where they'll say, well, they'll get inspiration from that in the sense of the depths of the willingness, the commitment you're willing to go to. But
Yeah.
that's
Don't do
not
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's not the
Not the way.
more of a
It's gotta slow you down.
right, but
That's
more of a
helpful.
symbolic presentation
Yeah.
of how committed you should be to the path, but not in that manner.
You know, I mean, this is somewhat banal or perhaps maybe just simply mundane, but I've been working on shedding some pounds for quite a few months. And I'm finding the process weirdly similar to a spiritual path in the sense of how you really have to stay with something as a permanent change if you're going to transform yourself. I mean, it's kind of an interesting exercise, you know, comparing the two different, very seemingly different. But it's interesting, you know, it's sort of the nothing will change if I don't change.
Yeah, I had, a teacher once described meditation and these practices to me as like, it's like if you're learning, and he said, and it's about as hard. He said, it's like learning how to play classical piano. You gotta wake up, you do your meditation, it's like doing your scales in the morning,
Yeah,
you just, and the consistency becomes really important because eventually that will get a little easier,
Right.
and I was like, wow. On the one hand, that was really daunting, but then on the other hand, it was like, okay, the principle being
Yeah, but those are.
practice makes perfect.
Exactly,
Right.
and like I said last week, the practice is just another way of saying habituating yourself to something.
Right.
And that's what meditation means in Tibetan. It means becoming habituated, you know, so. Yeah, that, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, you know, many teachers will give the examples of not only like classical piano, but, you know, studying to become a scientist, to get your degree, or, you know, an athlete. All of the rigorous training that they go through to become, you know, a top athlete. It's similar to what we're doing, with this path. We have to really take it like a, treat it as if we are training for something that's really worthwhile. That we really, that it's gonna be beneficial for us, gonna be beneficial for others. And as Kavita says, just like with changing your diet, which what we all have is we have habitual ways of eating. But in terms of the Dharma, we have habitual ways of thinking and speaking and acting. And many of those are not helpful to us or to others. And this is why we have to become familiar with what Nagarjuna is talking about, the practices that they're talking, and do these practices that will familiarize ourselves with this. If we don't practice, nothing's going to change. Just like with a diet, if we don't stop eating the food that's going to make us, you know, unhealthy and continue to gain weight, and start eating food that's going to make us healthy and help us to lose weight, nothing's going to change. We can think about it all we want, but that's not where the rubber hits the road. The rubber hits the road in the actual practice. This is why it's so important to have practices to do, why I put so much emphasis on practices at the very beginning of this, because I know from my own experience, just hearing the information is not enough. It's not until we actually engage in transforming ourselves that it begins to come to life and make a difference in who we are and how we interact and behave with everybody and everything. So those are all really good points. All the practices that Nagarjuna has presented so far can be summarized into 3 practices: generosity, ethical conduct, and patience. And of course, we all know that those are the first 3 paramitas, the first 3 perfections, the things that a bodhisattva needs to perfect on the pathway to enlightenment. We need to perfect our generosity. We need to perfect our ethics. We need to perfect our patience. In this case, patience is referring to the strength of mind that allows one to endure adversity with courage and forbearance. So like what you were saying, Kavita, in terms of, you know, you really want to eat that loaf of sourdough bread that you just made and slather it with butter. But you have the patience. Oh, it's good. She made a loaf. Oh my God, she made a loaf yesterday. It was the best ever. Oh, the texture was so great. And
Yeah.
when you toast it, well, I'm telling you, this is what we have to do. We have to go, we're talking about attachment here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the texture was so great, and when you toast it and put butter on it, it's got this really great after taste of slightly tangy.
There is.
It's like you can get.
Things
So anyway, in Kavita's case, she just has to have half a piece with a little butter on it and go,
Right.
that's it, that's enough.
Right,
So that's the patience we're talking about.
Right.
Sort of like forbearance is another word that they use. It's the strength and the courage
The
and
willpower.
and the willpower to and when we're talking about the Dharma, avoid these particular attachments we may have that are going to be detrimental for us, and also our habitual negative responses to things that are destructive. You know, our habitual criticisms, our lashing out with anger or judgment, and things like that. So we have to be very, very vigilant. So this is what, so he's been talking about this. Generosity, ethical conduct, and patience. We already discussed the 4 types of generosity that Buddha talked about. Ethical conduct involves abandoning the 10 non-virtues, plus these 3 additional actions that he said to avoid: taking intoxicants, wrong livelihood, and harming others. The kind of patience, there are 3 kinds of patience that he's talking about here. The patience of not retaliating. So that would be, you know, keep your lips zipped in your hands to yourself, you know, when somebody says something you don't like or does something you don't like, just don't retaliate, which is our normal response, you know.
Yeah,
Unless it's going to, some harm will come about because we don't step in and do
that's
something.
not retaliation.
Yeah.
Retaliation.
Retaliation is getting back at them.
Yeah, and
Getting
I think
even.
this is an overarching point of view that we need to take, in my opinion, based on my understanding, that with everything that Christopher is mentioning, we need to assume that we are mistaken about whatever it is that triggered us that we think we need to retaliate about. So whatever external person, place, or thing that comes about, we really I mean this like literally, we need to assume that we are incorrect, regardless of whether or not every media outlet agrees with, you know, blah, blah, blah. We just need to assume that the view is not correct. Because, why? Because we ourselves are still under the influence of our negative propensities. So everything we are seeing literally is being filtered through our negative propensities.
Very incorrect ones.
It's a very,
right.
when you really contemplate this, it's very sobering. It's a very sobering
Yeah.
thing, but what, you know, one thing to keep in mind when you feel like you're about to get triggered is, all right, do I want to abandon my mistaken view of things? Or do I want this very brief feeling of, I'm the greatest?
The rush of retaliation.
But you know, it's a little bit like, do I want this piece of cheesecake or do I want to have a healthy, you know, cholesterol level or whatever, you know?
Mhm.
But it's,
Yeah.
I've been listening to, part of what's on my mind is I've been listening to audio tapes from Geshe Drogpa's. These are all teachings that are online on YouTube. And I've been trying to transcribe this one that he talks about how to develop bodhicitta. And it's really, he really reminded me of how the blanket of our delusional perspective on everything that seems to be external, you know, all the bad things out there and the bad people out there and the bad situations out there. It's a sobering thing to contemplate, and the implications are quite humongous.
Yeah. Even Christoph Koch, who I was talking about last week, the neuroscientist, he says that our consciousness is the thing that is making the decision about what's going on out there. It's our consciousness doing that. It's not coming from the side of the
What
event or
Geshe-
the person.
way Geshe Drogpa put it, I'll just share this one last thing. He said, if you see negative things happening externally, it's because the karmic propensities in you are what is activated.
Well,
If you don't see a positive external world, it's because the karmic propensities in you have not been activated. And, you know, you can.
I think
take
our
that-
karmic propensities have been activated if, you know, we.
So it's quite,
Big propensity power activate.
it's quite profound and has implications that
Yeah.
are completely against our normal way of
Right.
thinking about.
Yeah.
That goes back to when, you know, when I was talking about pure vision results in a pure world, the way if we clear up the way we perceive things and the way we project onto things, what's gonna happen is the way the external world appears to us will clear up. We will view the whole thing with love and compassion rather than
But
whatever.
That's the
Like,
peace on earth.
yeah, that's the peace on earth thing. Yeah, go ahead,
I'm
Brian.
gonna say, you know, if you follow your latest favorite author's theory,
Yeah,
you know, you can go back to Luca, who's the original entity from which all we spring. You're not talking about 10,000 hours worth of effort. You're talking about eons worth of effort to undo and rehabilitate and that
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. So, and you'll never know if you get it right, because as you just said, if he really is true, if consciousness really is what we think it is and use it to make our interpretation of the world, and we all have different consciousnesses, and we all have different DNA profiles and different evolutionary behavior and all that, you know, I mean, it's hard to know how to undo all that stuff in the right way.
yeah. Right, I mean, if we think about what the Buddhist teachings say and what we've been studying is that it's not as if samsara is like gonna go away. And when one becomes enlightened, one is no longer affected by it. Is not suffering because of it, can see the pathway out of it, and because the love and compassion has been developed to such an extent, there is this desire to help all of the beings who are suffering, because suffering is the problem. That is the problem. So an enlightened being will happily go appear in samsara in whatever form they need to be of benefit for whoever, you know, they can help. So it's not like it goes away, but our view and our experience of it changes to something that can be beneficial. I don't know, ultimately, I mean, they talk about this great enlightenment, but I mean, if you're talking about infinite beings, well, that's gonna take infinite time, right? So the thing you do is just go, all right, wait a minute, I'm gonna renounce my attachment to this whole samsara ego grasping thing. I'm gonna work on transforming myself so that I'll have a better experience and help others have a better experience. And that's really what it comes down to sort of minimize or get rid of suffering for as many as possible.
Right.
And in terms of Buddhism, our teacher said, don't worry about it if this planet blows up. There are plenty of other planets and galaxies that you can be, you know, born into, and realms and all of this kind of stuff. So it's not like it's just about Earth, for us, right?
You know, I mean, I don't know that I wasn't gonna say anymore. Oh, well. If you think of the entire existing universe, and I mean like anything that exists in any realm, any dimension, whatever, okay, the ginormous universe, think of it as a sandbox that consciousnesses are playing in.
I like that.
No, and so, but I mean, on an energetic and waveform particle level, you know, this is essentially the universe we are in. And so if you have that view and you enter into the sandbox and you see that some unfortunate, really negative propensity group of kids are playing war over in this part of the sandbox, it's like that, you know.
Right, and they're hurting one another
You
and suffering.
have risen, your consciousness has expanded to the point where you understand it's a sandbox. And you understand that these unfortunate beings have trapped themselves in this repetitive cycle of playing war in this part of the sandbox. It's kind of like that.
And so you want to show them another game.
Yeah.
play.
you know.
Yeah.
If they're ready to.
And if they're ready, right.
Show another game, otherwise, you know, there's a big sandbox, so.
Yeah.
And they keep kicking and screaming and crying.
Anyway, I'll,
Yeah.
What's in, yeah,
nobody, if I say anything else, somebody
no,
just.
it's okay.
Yeah.
So those who have no respect for the Dharma, in other words, no respect for the three practices of generosity, ethical discipline, and
Patience.
patience.
Then we
Thank
talk
you.
about non-retaliation.
Right, and they engage in practices that are opposite to those, such as the self-mortification and going on the wrong path and leading others down the wrong path. They're not practicing Dharma at all. They haven't attained liberation, and what they're doing isn't enough to attain liberation. So that ends the. So that ends talking about the ascetic practices that
So
are
what
mistaken.
are the other two patiences?
Right, we've got not retaliating. You said there were three different level, three patients.
Not retaliating.
Yes.
That's right. Enduring hardship. And wait a minute, enduring hardship and suffering. So you have kind of the fortitude. If, for instance, you have the karma to have something go wrong with you physically, or something go wrong, suffering, hardship due to financial reasons, you go, basically you say, this is my karmic appearance. I must have, as difficult as it is for us to do, it's also pretty liberating. You know, in my own experience, I have found this to be pretty liberating. So you realize this is my own karmic appearance coming back to me. I have a choice here of how I'm going to react to this. I could kick and scream and get angry and do all kinds of things that are going to make the situation worse, or I can just simply accept I must have done something like this. Something similar has caused this to happen to me now, and the quicker I go through it, move through it with a good attitude, the better things are going to be, because I've basically burned off that karma and not continued to keep it going by succumbing to either anger or attachment or whatever it may be because of what happened. So that's a way to transform it, to see the bad situation, the negative situations that occur to us as our karmic appearance, and accept that, rather than kick and scream and fight and blame somebody else for it. Even though it may seem like somebody else is the perpetrator and you're the victim, that means that in some other lifetime, some other situation, you were the perpetrator and this person was the victim. Or somebody like this person was the victim. And so you're now simply experiencing those experiences that you caused for someone else. And that's a way to look at it that is really helpful. It's really helpful because we all have experiences like that. You know, we have an illness or something goes wrong with our job or in our relationships or things like that. And it seems like, wow, I did everything I could possibly do and it's not working out. And that they will say that this is because it's a karmic appearance. It's a karma coming to fruition and ripening, and you just let it ripen and don't make it worse.
It's the you created previously.
It's the
Getting back to
the self you created previously, and so we don't want to continue that self going into the
I
future.
think it's also important to just also make sure you don't forget the converse karma, which is positive karma.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of positive things happen in your life.
Right.
We don't tend to focus on those, but
Right.
we always focus on the negative, but there are a lot of positive things that happen too that you created through your previous karmic actions. And so people need to continue to remind themselves that, yeah, I may be suffering from this particular thing, but in other areas or other things, things are going better, or things are good, or,
Yeah.
they're fine.
That is a really good point, because you're right. We take all the positive stuff for granted.
Yep.
Like we expect it. That's the way it should be, and that's not the case. You look around, it's just not the case. We have so much going for us. Just here in this room, we have so much going for us. And we should always rejoice in that and not take it for granted.
And the suffering, like you say, you can look at it as your own karmic reflection. It cultivates compassion.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's what that feels like.
They say that's one of the best things you can do in that
it's like
situation.
you know, if you haven't experienced or if you caused something in the past or whatever, then you experience something, it's like, oh, then you really feel the experience of what perhaps you created
Right,
or what's going on in the world. You just
Right.
have more compassion for it because
Right.
you know,
Mhm.
it's not just a thought, it's a experience.
It's an experience, and right, and for a bad one, for instance, that occurs to you, and you take it on as a karmic result happening to you. In my case, I would say, wow, I'm
so
never
sorry.
going to do that to anyone again
Right.
because of the way this feels.
Yeah.
This is not good, and I will not do this.
And I know from my own personal experience and, I have a situation right now that's kind of like that, where watching some suffering, and to me, the most helpful thing to get through it is to keep telling myself, okay, I'm experiencing this, but I don't focus so much on because I can go down the guilt and blame thing, like, oh, I caused this. So what I like to do is do basically okay, I'm gonna experience this for everyone else who is also experiencing this, and that seems to get me a little out of my head enough that it doesn't hurt quite so bad, or it gives some kind of meaning to it.
Right.
So I don't know, that's,
They
it's Tonglen essentially.
Exactly, and that's what they talk about. That's the
Yeah.
practice. It sort of connects you
Yeah,
with the suffering of others, and you realize this is not. It gives you empathy and compassion that we may not have otherwise because simply we haven't, experienced it for ourselves.
and it truly does ease the suffering a little bit.
It does.
Yeah.
It does, because in some way you're reaching out to help others,
Yeah.
and if it's just in your mind, in
it's
your
just
heart.
in your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's opposed to suffering. And that's a really good point too. Okay, let's see, we're gonna get into mechanics here now. Before we get into the mechanics, Nagarjuna says that if we want to take the essence from this precious human rebirth that we have, and we want to attain liberation and enlightenment, the first thing we need to do is seek out an unmistaken pathway to that.
Hun,
Yeah.
before you go on, Lee has a question. Can compassion exist without suffering?
I don't think so, because if you look at the very first teaching of the
I get,
Buddha,
can a person have compassion
if they haven't
without
experienced.
having had suffering themselves? Is that what you mean? Lee?
It was just kind of a rhetorical question. I was just thinking.
Oh, don't do that.
Well, but Lee, I would say that is the case because if you think of the very first teaching the Buddha gave, the very first teaching was there is suffering. We all experience suffering. Anybody who is in this cyclic existence is experiencing suffering of some kind. Some of us, are not. It's not intense now, but there have been times when it has been intense, and the only way we will compassion arises because suffering exists. So there cannot be.
Well, there you go. Somebody has to be suffering.
You can't have compassion if there's no suffering. All you would just have is love. But compassion is may you not suffer. That's what compassion means. That's the Buddhist definition of compassion, is may you not suffer. So yeah, compassion is linked to suffering and relieving suffering, basically. But compassion is about ending suffering and relieving suffering.
And when you say all you can have is love, meaning love is different than compassion.
Love is the wish, may you be happy. But if somebody is writhing on the floor in pain because of something that has occurred to them, you're not going to go, oh, gee, may you be happy. You go, how can I help you? What can I do? How can I relieve this? That's compassion.
Well, I think the answer to Lee's question is she needs to become enlightened. Yeah, compassion without suffering.
Right, we all need to become enlightened, don't we? That's what we're working on.
Well, to that end, another thing Geshe Drapa said in the audio I was listening to yesterday was that you can do all these contemplations on developing compassion. And you're, the generating, fabricated compassion or fabricated bodhicitta. He said, but until you meditate on the nature of reality, how things exist, in other words, what we would call, until you plumb the depths of the meaning of emptiness, your compassion can't, your negative emotions won't be completely eliminated. So the contemplations can temporarily lessen your lack of compassion, but only by realizing emptiness finally and fully is it is your negative propensities to not come from love and compassion eliminated. I'm sort of saying it in the flip side, but just thought
The thing that
I know
gets
it's not
the-
exactly what we're talking about right
No,
now,
it
but
actually is.
he said it so many times over the years that I feel that a responsibility to
No, it's very related. I remember Geshe Rinpoche would always say, without a realization of emptiness, our compassion will be unstable. For instance, we all will have compassion for the victim, but we do not have compassion for the perpetrator. So our compassion is very unstable. With a realization of emptiness, you would realize, whoa, the perpetrator is just carrying out, something that, happened to them and they're repeating it. It's all psychological. This is all in the mind, and then it comes out in ways that we harm each other. And so you have compassion for both the victim and the perpetrator, equal compassion. But that's a stable compassion that only comes with a understanding and eventually a realization of emptiness and how everything is constantly changing and shifting according to causes and conditions. So so he's saying we need to seek out an unmistaken path and a qualified spiritual teacher of that path, and we've been fortunate to have that. We have His Holiness, we've had Geshe Rinpoche, we have a whole lineage, Geshe Nyima, and all of the teachers that other people have had. These are qualified teachers that can help us traverse this path in the correct way. And so he's saying, seek out the path and make sure you meet with qualified teachers and follow them. And we need to familiarize ourselves with the Dharma and the Dharma practices. Okay, now we're going into some really important mechanics of karma. And in this case, Nagarjuna is talking about karmic results of what are called complete actions and in this case, he's talking about non-virtuous or negative karmic results of what are called complete actions. So when we follow a wrong path or are inconsistent, in our practice and lazy, which happens all the time, and we follow, when we're following the correct path, we can follow the Dharma. We can say we're practicing Dharma, but be lazy about it, be inconsistent about it, get back to it later, that kind of thing. We don't habituate ourselves regularly to it. And that happens a lot. That's happened to me for sure. When that happens, we can create non-virtuous destructive karma and experience the results of it. So here's where we get to the mechanics, and we're going to go through this several times, and this is what you were talking about.
Okay, and I just said the overall way to think about this is how you create your future.
This is how we are creating our future self, whether positive or negative. Okay, for a complete action to occur, whether it's negative or positive, it must have the following three components. One, we have to have the intention to take the action. Before we take any action, it can't just be something that we do unintentionally because, something, got in our faces. We have to consciously have an intention that we're going to take a particular action. Right? The second is that we engage in that action. Go ahead and take it. We don't just think about it and intend to do it, but we actually take the action. And then the third is the completion, that we complete that action and have no regrets about it. We're happy that we, yelled at our mother. We're happy that we retaliated and got back. That's a complete negative action. For instance, somebody criticizes you and you have this anger arises and you have the intention of, I'm going to let them have it. And then you let them have it. And when you're done, you go, I feel great. That is a complete non-virtuous action. You have done it, and karma is going to result because of it. Complete karma. So here's how it results, okay? A complete action has 3 results. The first is called the ripening result. I'm just going to give the names. The second is called the result similar to the cause. Right now, we're just getting the names. And the third is called the environmental result. Now we'll go into what they mean. The ripening result refers to the kind of rebirth that we're going to take, the kind of rebirth that we're going to have. We're talking about creating our future self. So if we create a lot of complete actions of negative karma, right? It's going to, or positive karma, it's going to have a ripening result in terms of the kind of rebirth that we're going to be thrown into after we die, that we're going to take. Sometimes I call it throwing karma, but it's the ripening result. The results similar to the cause, there are 2 types of results similar to the cause. So this second one breaks down into 2 parts, 2 components. The first are situations that resemble those we caused others to experience. For instance, somebody sexually molests you, when you're a child. Well, you must have created that experience for someone at another time in order for you to have that experience yourself. That's a result similar to the cause that has to do with your experience. The second one, so not that it makes it good or right or anything, but at least it gives the victim some sense of control or power over, that they had something to do with this. It wasn't just random. Right? So that's very, very helpful when you're talking about victims and perpetrators. It really is. Then a second component of the result similar to the cause is the tendency to behave and act the same way again in the future. So if you, we'll go back to the same situation. If you were a perpetrator of say, sexual abuse, and this was a complete action, you didn't actually regret it, right? You intended to do it, you took the action, and you were happy you did it. Well, that you're going to keep behaving in the same way. You're going to grow that's going to continue. You will have results similar to the cause in terms of your behavior. So the results similar to the cause in terms of the experience you have, and results similar to the cause in terms of your behavior. Is that clear? Okay. All right.
Creating habits.
Yeah.
The more you yell at mom, the more likely you are to keep
You're
yelling
gonna keep yelling at mom,
Yeah.
and you're happy about it. You don't regret it.
Yeah.
You're glad about it. You feel good. I showed her.
What?
Are you confused?
No.
Oh.
Oh, did you have a question?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out how you break the cycle.
Oh, well, yes. That's what this is all about. Right, yeah. All right. Then the environmental. This is the environmental result influences where we are born in our next rebirth and the type of environment we live in. So whether we're born, in a middle-class family, in a nice little suburb with a yard and a house and blah, 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 or we're born in, on the streets of Delhi as a beggar.
Right.
That's the environmental result. So again, we have the ripening result, the type of rebirth we have, the realm, the form, whatever it is, the type of rebirth. We have the results similar to the cause, which are the experiences similar to experiences that we've generated, and the behavior similar to behavior that we've generated. And then the environmental result, which is the type of place that we are born into, and the environment. Is it healthy and beneficial, or is it not?
So. Let me just ask a differentiating question.
Yeah,
So take the situation in Gaza now.
right.
So you have combatants, people who do the killing. And you have the people who are killed, especially the children. Lots of people, so. Following this logic. Would you argue that the children, for example, who were killed are in previous iterations, those that did the killing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
And what about the ones who are doing the killing now?
they are. We have to feel nothing but compassion for them,
No, no, I
because
get
they're
that.
You're gonna go back
They're gonna-
and do it again.
they're going to experience being killed in the future.
Okay. All right, so now you're gonna.
And they're gonna
so
be
It
potentially
seems like
born
this is
in
much
an
of the world we
environment.
live in these days.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
Samsara.
okay, fine.
Yeah,
So the question is, how do you get out of this cycle? If it's not you personally who's got all this knowledge about Buddhism, how do you get these people out of this cycle?
Well, you're going to sort of, at some point, have to come to that kind of knowledge. Whether you call it Buddhism or don't call it Buddhism, you're going to have to change. You're going to have to change the habitual imprints on your stream of consciousness from destructive negative ones, and burn those, purify them, stop them, and make new imprints of positive ones, of productive ones, of beneficial ones. It's like what we talked about last time with the Vajrasattva practice. You know, you're getting rid of the negative imprints on the mental continuum, and you're creating new positive imprints onto it. That's basically, it's about habits. We have to change bad habits and create good habits.
Right, I'm just trying to figure out how practically that would happen.
I would say two things. One, that the suffering of children and things like that, I heard the Dalai Lama actually ask that once during a tsunami, and he did, he said, yes, if you go by the traditional. And that's a hard one for people to take, you know,
Right.
that they somehow, because the interpretation, oh, they deserved it, and it's like, well, yeah, technically they created the causes, but that's
right.
not the way to think about it, because it's, again, it should be compassion. How do you stop it? I think this is where teachers are absolutely essential, and where I think that there are, because again, let's say you're trapped in that. You're just fighting and fighting and fighting, and you're like, how is that ever going to change? It's gonna change because some bodhisattva somewhere, some Buddha emanates and teaches them, or
Is it
plants a
influence
seed
somehow?
that says, hey, you know, maybe we shouldn't do this, or maybe and if you believe that everybody's minds are inherently empty and have the potential to change, you know, then even someone like Hitler, who had, you know, can turn that around. But for me, I think that's what made the whole idea of the importance of a teacher click for me, is like, how would I have ever known unless I had read a book or something, or had somebody, I mean, I think some of that's inherent in us, but I don't know, does that make sense?
Sure.
Like, that I think there's a.
Yeah,
Well, and
I mean, a
think-
teacher represents the Dharma, really.
Right,
talking
and I
about.
think also,
some
you know,
exposure.
as Christopher has mentioned many times, you know, we all kind of know ourselves. We all have had our journey to Buddhism. You know, it's been filled with suffering. And we're looking for an answer somewhere else. So I would only make the assumption that they too similarly would have that, okay, my grandfather was in the war, my father was in the war, you know, like all these horrible made, and then that teacher plants the seeds, you know, somehow you then go, okay, maybe there's that click.
And maybe it's not
there's a
Buddhist teacher,
different
maybe it's
path.
someone in.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't have to be
Individual
Buddhist.
standing
They
up
just
and
have to be
saying,
saying the
hey.
right thing.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But also what you're saying is, like for the completion of the karma,
Yeah,
that
You
you
have
have no regret.
You have no
So-
regrets, right?
So there's regret that comes in, and perhaps some of the victims
right,
come back with full knowing that I'm gonna put myself in this situation again and give someone the opportunity, you know, to raise the sword or whatever.
Right,
And treat it with love, and there can be I mean,
right,
it doesn't happen like in, I would not imagine in large numbers collectively, but
Yeah.
it can happen where there's so much acceptance and love that the other, you know, that the one that's perpetrating is like, just drops it.
Right.
Right, there's a range of possibilities, because if it's
Right.
not a complete action, like you were saying, then it's not a complete karma. And so there's room there for
purification.
purification, yeah.
I was gonna say, or use the analogy of someone who's caught in a really strong alcoholism or addiction. How are they ever gonna get out? Right? It's kind of the same question, right?
Yeah.
At some point,
We're
either
in that.
they're gonna hit rock bottom and something in them is gonna get triggered, like I have to change. Cause there's some seed of goodness in them or
Right.
that real wisdom in them somewhere. Or someone's gonna help them. And that, I don't know, I mean,
Right.
that's,
This is one of the frustrating things personally for me,
yeah,
is that when I talk to the monks,
Uh-huh.
teachers, it's like, yeah, you know, all this is fine and good, but we're not going out proselytizing, we're not trying to convince, we're not going, and if you want it, come, we'll give it to you,
Yeah.
but don't, you know, we're not gonna go out
Don't
and
sell
say,
it.
you know,
Sure.
don't sell it, and it's like, well, okay. There's so much suffering in the world, and if this is the right path, then, you know, it would be helpful to have that path out there more well known.
But
If
not,
your teacher analogy is right, then you.
that's
need-
fair.
But we have opportunity, like as being students of the Dharma. Someone comes in, you're, you know, a family member in addiction. There they are. You can do Dharma talk all the time. In heavy addiction, it's like right over their head.
Right.
But
that's right.
still practice compassion and reach an arm into the hell realm, and you know, so there, it's like there is a way to help
But they
without
have to
preaching,
shift.
but by
Right.
touching them in some way, but we're not actually preaching the Dharma, we're practicing.
Right, but there's only 4 million of us.
I know.
But-
Taking a long-
you know, Merritt's absolutely right, I mean, having no, you know,
Yeah.
addicts. They're not interested in the Dharma, or if they sit in on a Dharma teaching, they'll go, you know,
Yeah.
that's not for me.
Right,
They're not ready to
so
hear
something
it.
has to happen within them,
Yeah, so all of this occurs one consciousness at a time.
when that consciousness has gotten to that point.
To the
where
point.
something's.
There's
clicking,
enough
and
suffering
now is
Because there
when
must be
the
a
focus
there must be
is, yeah.
something else I can do.
Yeah.
But we can practice.
But we can,
Dharma
absolutely,
Exactly.
absolutely, we can be the
Absolutely.
best
And
example we
live
can.
it. Just
because
live the
it's
example.
Experiential,
Yeah,
something alters their.
yeah,
And if you believe in what happens when someone becomes enlightened and is a Buddha, they do have the ability, so it's said,
Yeah.
to know what that person, that addict
Yeah.
needs,
And that's
Here.
right.
to plant that seed.
and it may not
Which
be a
we don't.
loving, kind
We don't,
word,
yeah.
you know,
Right.
it could be a 2x4 or something really sharp, you know, in their
Right,
language
right.
to snap them out, but they know what that individual, whatever that individual needs to hear.
We don't yet.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
which
no.
again should motivate us that that's why we want it, because so we know how to spark that in other.
Right,
people.
I know.
Right,
I mean, Venerable Rabina used to say her teacher, Lama Yeshe, was very, very, very rough on her. I mean,
Really?
she said he called her a fat cow.
Wow.
He didn't do that with others, but he could see, I mean, Rabina will say this herself. She said, I came out of the womb angry.
yeah.
I was angry just right out on the, you know, at the start. And so Lama Yeshe, you could size that up anyway,
Right.
just seeing Rabina. So he treated her in a different way, in a way that would, you know, work at, you know, breaking that down. And so she could experience some of the effects of what she was doing, right?
Right.
And she's very happy to give others that experience.
And she will,
She scared me.
she's, I mean, hello, she's giving me that experience and it made me
I
think
see
a
you
lot.
smilingly.
So, but, and also in terms of your observation, Brian, Venerable Robina is an example of someone who is out there every day, constantly. So it's maybe, so maybe it's that the Western Buddhist teachers are going to have a different kind of role than the traditional, Tibetan Buddhist teachers who are very much, they come from the monastic life, where Bina did too, but she's out there, and many of them are,
Well,
Tibetan
and she
children.
had, albeit she was, wanting to become a Catholic nun, but she had a life.
Yeah,
Yes.
Prior, she wasn't
Yes.
raised in a monastery, she
Right.
had a life before, she was out there, she was a bit of an activist, if I recall, like, if there was anything, she was there.
She was a little bit of everything,
She was in the middle of
Yeah,
it, so yeah.
Let me ask a different question. So you're talking about the three actions of complete karma:
Mm,
intention, action, no regret.
right,
But then we've talked about the 10 virtuous and non-virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind.
mhm.
So some of those mind ones, even though you don't act on them, are still non-virtuous actions.
Yeah, they're non-virtuous, what do they call them, afflictions?
Okay, so how does that interact with karma? If you need to have karma, you need to have more than just the thought. You need to have the action and no regret.
Correct. It's still a
So
negative
thinking
karma,
of
but
it-
it's not
Wait a
as
minute,
bad
the
as.
thought is the intention,
The intention.
yeah,
But if you only have the intention and don't act on the intention, then
then it's not a complete karma.
Okay,
It's
so
still
is it
negative.
incomplete karma? Or-
It's right, it's not complete, it doesn't have the full
wait a second.
karmic impact.
Hold on.
So does it
I'm
have
gonna
result?
slice and
does,
dice it
Negative
because
result.
you can have the intention. I mean, intention is a funny word. But let's just say you have a coworker that you just don't like anyway. So you have an ongoing, sort of persistent under the surface intention to find anything and everything to not like about them and prove yourself right.
Mhm.
So when, let's say they receive an award that you don't feel they deserved, some kind of acknowledgement, and you develop malice. Maybe one of the, in other words, you hate them and you wish bad things would happen to them. You wish that they would be shamed in public, not
Praised.
celebrated. So that's a mental action. You have the intention, which is find anything and everything bad about that person all the time, that's sort of there. And you get these occasional instances where you get to actively cultivate the thought, shit, I wish they'd be exposed, and wouldn't it be great if they'd be exposed, and maybe if I, that is an action, that is a mental action, because it's important to remember this. And I'm surprised you didn't address this in a way that everything we're experiencing starts with our thoughts.
Well, that's what I was
So the
going to
most
say.
the most vital thing going on all the time is our thoughts. So
But
it's
do you-
not
are you
accurate to
happy?
say, oh gee, there's no karmic implication if. I go on wishing ill towards this person till the day I die, I wish them ill.
Yeah, there's a dharmakirti, I think, the actual definition of karma, I had to memorize the Tibet.
Yeah.
Liturgy, so anyway, there's something, but it was basically karma is an action of the mind and what it motivates,
There you go.
basically. So
But to
it's
make
the
it
movement of the
complete-
mind,
You would be,
any movement of the mind.
but to make it a complete mental action, you would have that thought and be happy that you had.
That's
it.
right.
You had that thought, you
Yeah,
can
exactly.
have that thought and like, oh, I wish I didn't
Yeah.
think that, but I really do.
Yeah.
Think that,
That-
but I
that's-
really wish I didn't, so that's.
It's
Yeah,
That
important
does
that,
lessen it.
It-
it's
yes.
important that we,
One
it's
thing,
important that we continue to remind ourselves that this is all a mental undoing of samsara, and we are, unfortunately, because of the way things appear as physical, we seem to be more interested in the physical and the speech things because they're quote tangible. We apprehend them with our other senses besides our mental sense. But anyway,
you can have, for instance, you can kill someone, but not have had the intention to do it. And so that killing doesn't have the full impact of a complete karma, which is the intention, you take the action, and you are satisfied with the action you took. I'm thinking of, I don't know if you remember, maybe about 6 years ago, I think it was before COVID, there was a young guy who was driving his truck somewhere out in the hill country. And he was texting as he was driving, and it was one of these windy roads in the hill country. So he's texting as he's driving, and he comes around a corner and he smashes right into a busload of elderly people who are out, from the care home to go on a little outing and kills all of them. He killed all of them because he was texting. Now, he did not have the intention to
Right,
kill them. However, that was a major killing event.
major.
And he, the action was there, the intention was not there, the killing was there, but he was reckless in his behavior. There was reckless behavior there. So that still is serious. It's not the same as I'm waiting for these elderly folks and I'm gonna smash into the bus and kill them all.
Yeah.
That makes it a really, really strong negative karma, especially if after it's done, the kid goes, good job, I'm glad to see them gone from the planet.
Right,
That's not what happened. He was filled with remorse, and he's in prison now, but.
yeah,
So you can see that there are levels of subtlety to karma. All they're talking about here is what is a complete strong karma,
karma, actually.
But you can easily to address your point of intention, Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to say everything exists on the tip of a wish, meaning the tip of an intention.
Mhm.
It all starts in the mind. It all
Yeah.
starts in the thoughts. We don't do, like I've said before, we don't even get up and walk to the bathroom unless we sort of think we're gonna do it first.
Right,
Well, I mean, it's really important to go back to this, and I will one more time remind us all of what Geshe Drachma said, that if you have the negative propensity, then the negative external appearance will come up. So the propensity,
Right.
I mean, this is all, and it's all becomes mind training,
Right.
it is mind training.
Those malicious thoughts you were talking about, what they do is they poison our mental continuum.
And I'm
Right.
gonna say, it matters,
Exactly.
well, anyway, it
And
matters.
at some point, it will get so poisoned that you're gonna be the one who, blurts out all their faults. You're gonna actually say the thing.
And it's all incorrect view.
And it's all
it's all
incorrect.
incorrect.
So to just simplify this train of thought, our goal as practitioners, as Buddha said himself, or whatever, somebody said this anyway, is do no harm.
Mhm.
This is the ultimate achievement of the Buddhist path. Do no harm, and when possible, help. That's the ultimate achievement.
Right.
So how do we do all this training so that we 100% of the time do no harm, and 100% of the time. And so in order to achieve that, we need the correct view.
Right, not only the correct view,
That's the very simple formula.
not only the correct view, but we have to really work on transforming our incorrect habits.
Mhm.
The habits in the mind stream, because those, we may want to do no harm. And we may want to be of help. But if we have all these negative habits in our mind stream and something triggers it, that wanting to do no harm and be of help will go out the window. So we have to change those habits. And that goes back to the process of purifying the negative ones and imprinting positive karmic habits onto our mental continuum. That goes back to the Vajrasattva practice. It goes back to, the
All of which is
pure-
taking place from the mind.
it's all the
mind is-
mind. It is all the
mind's the
mind.
boss.
Yeah.
The mind is behind all of this.
Mhm.
So if we realize correct view,
Yes.
and because of the nature of our biology and our mind, our brains don't work that way. So that's the work.
Mhm.
That's the word.
And perhaps the evolution they don't talk about evolution.
Ultimately, you're right. Ultimately, having a realization of emptiness is the thing that's going to make all of the difference. However, what they
We have
say
to do
is
all these-
when we have all of these negative propensities in our mental continuum, our mind is too disturbed
Yeah.
to actually have a realization of emptiness. It's not going to happen. It's impossible. We're too disturbed. We will not be able to even have the clarity of mind to have that realization. So why this is the first practice the Buddha gave is that we have to clear this up before we have to clear it up to a pretty large degree before we actually can have that realization of emptiness.
Right.
So
It could
this,
take a few lifetimes doing it.
well, we've already, I mean, obviously, we've taken some already.
Right, because
So
we're here.
We're not at the very beginning here.
Right.
We are, you know, well on the way, and
Right.
we should rejoice about that, really, we
Mhm.
should be happy about that. The fact that we're even sitting here talking about this and having Zoom people sitting here talking about it, listening to it is kind of amazing,
Yes.
you know, it's really kind of amazing in this world. So, we should be glad.
Yes.
Where are we in time now? I don't know. Well, I mean, at least we talked about those, you know, the way karma, you know, those complete actions. All right, what he does now, he goes through a series of karmic actions, and he tells us what their results will be, what the result, if it's a complete action, right? So he says in stanza 14, a short life comes through killing. So we're talking about a complete action of killing. All the elements are there. You know,
Mhm.
you intended it, you did it, you were glad about it. Not like the poor kid texting in his truck. Much suffering comes through harming. So if you harm others, you're going to experience a lot of suffering. Poor resources come through stealing. So if you're doing a lot of stealing, you're going to have a future rebirth where you're not, resources aren't available to you.
Right.
And enemies come through adultery, through he's saying harmful sexual behavior.
Mhm.
So first, if we intentionally or recklessly cause others to die, it will result in our life being cut short in future lifetimes. That will probably happen, I would think, to that guy in the truck, because it wasn't just a mere, he was doing something he shouldn't have been doing while driving. And it was an extreme consequence that occurred. So
Right.
that is going to affect his mind in a very big way. He didn't intend to do it, and he was not glad about doing it, but it's going to have an effect on him. Whereas, you know, somebody who's a fisherman out in the stream and it's so pleasant and he's, you know,
He's intending
killing,
to catch that
he's
fish.
intending to catch the fish and killing it, but it's not yet hit his mind that this is not, you know, I'm actually taking away the life of this fish that, you know, would be very happy not to die right now. So at some point that may catch up with the fisherman, and if they do it enough, you know,
They'll be the fish.
they'll have, that will happen to them, yeah. Harming and inflicting violence on others will cause much harm to ourselves in future lives. If we experience being beaten or wounded by others or great physical pain, even though we haven't physically harmed others in this life, it is the result of inflicting harm and violence on others in past lives. So this helps us a lot in personal situations where we know someone who's experienced these horrible, you know, they've been beaten up, they've been locked in closets. I mean, we had a friend who, she was born into this family where her mother and stepfather beat her and locked her in a closet. And she was a Buddhist practitioner. But that comes from treating others in that way
Right.
previously. So that at least can help either us to understand what's going on with somebody we care about, or that person eventually who has experienced the victim of perpetration will see, oh, I must have done this and I will never do this to anyone ever again.
Right.
You know, the result of stealing and taking what has not been freely given to us is being poor and having few possessions. Experiencing poverty or having trouble holding on to our possessions in this life is the result of stealing in previous lives. Now, again, these are all complete karmas.
Right.
Complete karma. If you stole something, regretted it, and gave it back, or if you took something by mistake and said, wait a minute, this is yours, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Or, yeah, because there are people, you know, you see, I mean, I don't know, but there are people that I've seen, like in movies or something, like, they're stealing diapers from the gas station because their baby needs
Right,
a diaper.
it's a different intention.
Yeah, you know,
It's an
not
intention
out
to be of
love,
help.
right, and
Right.
out of harm,
Yeah.
and, you know, maybe
Yeah.
they pay it back.
So that's
later,
different.
you know, yeah.
It's different. So
Yeah.
it's subtle. What he was describing were complete actions.
Right.
And these are the results of complete actions. Adultery causes relationship problems in future lives so that your spouse or partner becomes like an enemy to you. So, for instance, if you were slept around a lot in past lives and were adulterous in past lives, you will come into a present life where you're going to experience a partner who is not faithful to you. So it's like in this life, your partner may run off with somebody, and both your partner and the person they took up with also become your enemies. This is why adultery causes enemies. If you think of divorces, and particularly divorces that occur because somebody's fooling around with somebody else, well, both parties wind up hating each other. And if there are kids involved, they wind up hating each other. They hate the person to the other one married. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess. And that's all, it can be related to sexual misconduct. But of course, we're talking about complete actions.
Right,
They're glad they did all of that.
yeah.
So where are we now?
What about
Right.
addiction? People with, do they talk about that, people that come in with extreme, alcoholism or drug or?
Well, it would be a similar thing.
It's
I mean, a similar thing. It would be like it would have to be a case where, for instance, with my sister, who was a terrible alcoholic, and she died of alcohol poisoning. She would say things like, I know exactly how to handle drinking. And so she intended to have the drink. She wanted to have the drink. She took the drink and she was glad she drank.
Mhm.
And it wound up killing her, of course. I mean, literally
Right.
killing her. Others it's not quite the same. For instance, some people are what's the drug that you give them once and an opioid, and then they're addicted. They can't help
a
themselves.
student athlete who
Right.
broke something and then they're put on that and then now they become addicted to
They
that.
didn't even intend to do that.
Yeah.
And so
What's the past implication or something like that? So in a way,
the past implication would probably be something like
they harm somebody.
we harm somebody unintentionally.
Similarly.
We're not thinking. Sort of the opioid was being used for medical purposes.
Right,
It's unintentional, but there are intentional. People are giving
Yeah.
drug pushers are giving people drugs intentionally to get them hooked.
Right.
So that's
Right.
very, very bad karma, and they're glad about it. They're making money from it.
And then what about, so someone who has extreme poverty, which, many people
Yeah.
come into the world with extreme poverty. So what is the role that someone plays in being generous, and giving and being generous with your resources to someone with that karma? I mean, you want to help.
We should help
And
whenever
we should
when
help,
we can.
and it's
yeah.
just,
If there's a person on the street,
Yeah.
and they're like this begging for you, if you have some cash, give it to them. Give it to them. I mean, we want to help them, and we want to show, we want to be an example of being
Yeah,
helpful and
yeah.
generous. So
right, which it gets confusing because, especially in a situation like that, you see them out there begging. When we were in India with Geshe Nima, he was like, do not give any money to any of the beggars because it only perpetuates them to
Right.
continue the habit of begging versus finding resources for themselves. And so how do you find that balance? How do you then,
Yeah. different
practice
teachers
by
say
giving?
different things about that.
Yeah,
I know, Geshe Nima, Geshe Dragpa, they were all raised up in that environment, raised in the monastery.
right,
But Venerable Robina says,
Yeah.
it's not your business what they do with that money.
right,
That's not your business.
right,
Just be generous and give them what you
Right.
can. When you're right there with them, give them what you can.
right, exactly.
Right. If you're giving money to a charity, and that charity is funneling that money for purposes that aren't helping others, do not give money to that
Right,
charity.
exactly.
There are quite a few out there that are like that. They're very
Yeah.
it's wrong livelihood,
Yeah.
basically, what they're engaging in.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of criminal activity going on out there. But when we are directly one-on-one with somebody who
Right.
is hungry
Yeah.
or needs money,
Get them some food.
don't
you
even,
know.
don't, it's not like Robina says, and I've always liked this, it is not our business to, decide what they're going to do with it and
I
not
know
give
they're
them.
probably a drug addict, by giving this, they're just gonna get more
Right,
alcohol.
that's not our
It's
business.
not our business, exactly.
Right, be generous, show
And-
generosity.
There are a lot of people who need extra money and things like that, and so. I don't remember who it was who suggested it, but it could have been Venerable Robina, it could have been someone else. But like if you've got, instead of always giving money out to then your financial detriment, say I'm gonna give $50 a month to people that I run into, and then have that in settles in your console and then hand it out, and when that's done. You don't have to feel guilty
Right.
about every homeless person you pass that you weren't able to help.
Mhm.
Because you said, this is my goal, I'm going to do this, and then here it is, and that goal amount can be anything you choose.
I think one of the problems that both Geshe Draka and Geshe Nima were talking about, when you're in India
Yes,
and you give money to, say there's a woman there with a baby,
Right.
my hungry baby, and she's like this,
Right,
and
right.
you take money out to give to them, immediately there are 10 other mothers with little babies surrounding you.
right,
They're just waiting, they're like like vultures or something.
right,
So part of that is what they're talking about, because there's a whole industry of
About-
begging
right,
in India.
the more they're.
They actually arrive in the morning in Dharamsala via truck.
Right,
They're dropped off by their handler,
right,
and they work for the day begging, and then they are picked up by the handler. So
Right.
this is why I think,
and there are some that
Process.
even, you get more money because people have more sympathy if you're injured.
right, if
So
you have no
someone-
legs,
Someone was injured, so then now they're injuring their children or themselves to get more money, and so that's why they,
So- this is the dilemma.
right.
Um,
You wanna be generous and,
Basically, it just comes down to one-on-one
right,
and what you're feeling at the time. And try not to do it on a busy street in India, because you're gonna be surrounded with hands like this and,
Oh, I know,
I remember in Mexico City in the Zona Rosa. There was a woman, I was in a crowd of people, a woman holding her hand up for me, and I didn't have money to give. I mean, I didn't know the denominations and all that, so I just kept walking. She belted me. She just slapped me across the face. It's
were
like,
so-
okay.
I don't remember which monument or which place we were at with Geshe Nima, but there was a group of people there, local people there, we went. And then, Brian bought like a whole bunch of crackers or something to give out, or cookies, and there was almost like a brawl.
Yeah.
Because, there's
Yeah.
plenty for everyone, but, they were now, it was like
Right.
eating friend, and they were literally just grasping.
So you don't want to be creating that kind of activity.
Exactly.
And I think maybe that's what the monks are talking about.
Yeah,
Okay, we have to close it here.
yeah,
We're a little over time. So let's since we're over, let's just do the final dedication, and we'll say it in English on the bottom of the last page. In all my lives, may I not be separated from true lamas, and so enjoy the splendor of Dharma, fully perfecting the virtues of levels and paths. May I speedily attain the state of Vajradhara. And I hope we all know who Vajradhara is.
We do.
yes.
Thanks.